Hey, ladies and gentlemen. Today's book review is The Book of Gates, Magical Translation by Josephine McCarthy. I'm not done with the book because I've been working through the book, but I feel that it's significant enough to actually tell you about it because I think it's very important. This is kind of similar. There's a lot of parallels to the Cliff Off, where this is the Egyptian version of you going through the underworld, going through different trials, getting through the different gates in order to achieve your godhood. It is paralleling the travels of Ra, or Re, however you want to say it, the sun god in Egypt, when he sets and goes into the underworld and is steered through this underworld by a boat full of the gods. Now, the difference between his story, where he's being steered through the gods, and the Book of Gates is that you are being steered by your perception, which is Sia, your magic, which is Heka, and then Ma'at, which is your truth. Okay? So, if your magic is fueled off of ignorance, you're going to have a hard time getting through these gates. There's some similarities if your perception is messed up too. Like I'd say, okay, so really, I would say that this journey is not for beginners if you consciously want to go through these gates. However, no matter what you're doing, you are taking that journey because everything is above is reflected below. Okay, so what you're doing here and now carries your spirit through the different gates. It determines what kind of a god you will be if you become one, because there are areas where people who become we'll say the enlightened ones. I forgot what is the name of the people? Oh man. There's a specific name for the people who supposedly pass the test. But the thing is that you have to maintain your godhood or else you risk getting trapped in the Duat, which is the Egyptian underworld. Okay? So basically you have to stay balanced and you have to help others in order to maintain your godhood. That's the whole gist of it. What you do in life also helps people through the Duat, because there are people who are living who appear in the underworld. Okay? There are three types of people. There are gods, there are living people, there are dead people. Okay? When you go through the Duat, you're going to meet all three. And you may or may not know which ones are living, which ones are dead, and which ones are gods. Now, I mean, some of the dead ones that may show up may be ancestors. I have had a lot of family members that have passed on pop up recently during my works. Other people have been people I don't recognize. So I'm assuming those people are living. As for the gods, they do pop up, but I believe that they look like people, and a lot of times they take on masks. So they like help you, or they tell you certain things about yourself, but I think they're mixing in with the people, both living and both and dead. The way that this book is structured is you have a translation. You have two authors. You have the one that translates the Book of Gates from Egypt hieroglyphics to English, and then you have Josephine McCarthy, which gives an interpretation. Now, usually I would say it's good to interpret things yourself, and I do still encourage that, but I do feel that her interpretation is helpful. through my first pass through, because it helps me get an idea of what may be going on in the section that I'm trying to travel through, so that it helps with the test or understand whatever visions that I get. So what I usually do is I will read through, there's 12 hours of time in the underworld. So I'll read through, let's say, the first hour. After I read through the first hour, I'll make sure that I understand what God is at the gate, because at the end of each hour, that's when you get to the gate, and whatever goddess is guarding the gate has to let you through. So I'll read through the hour that I'm supposed to go through, make sure I understand the interpretation that the author has put out, and then I'll either go through a meditative state or a dream state in order to enter that specific part of the duat and go through my trials. Now, there's a lot of snakes in this, okay? Usually within Christianity, snakes represent the devil. Now, some of these snakes do test you like the devil does. But after you are tested and you pass the test, for example, in the first gate, that snake that tests you before you get through the first gate becomes your protector. There's also another gate, another snake called Mihin or Spiral. That snake is also seen as a protector of Ra. Now, since you are playing the role of Ra, those same protectors are going to protect you. The main snake that I would say is quote unquote the devil would be Apep, but he represents the chaos that is created through ignorance. Okay, so ignorance, your ignorance, willful or not, is your devil. That's what you have to contend against. Okay. Now, the similarities I see in the Qliphoth begin with the first gate. You know, like when I came to the gate, there was a snake, and the snake bit me, and I was like, yeah, okay, that's great. Like, I'm immune. Can you let me through? And I think the reason for this is because I've already gone through the Qliphoth as well as the Egyptian Tree of Life. So, I would say that, like, the Book of Gates is kind of like a mix of both the Tree of Life and the Qliphoth. But if when you start off in the Qliphoth, you start off in the sphere of Lilith, and you have Neama, which is guarding that sphere. Well, she manifested as a snake lady, and she bit me during my time in that sphere. So that was a parallel between the Qliphoth and the Book of Gates. Now, there's a lot of parallels in Christianity that are in the Book of Gates. And it makes a lot of sense because Jesus came out of Egypt before he was Christed. Okay, so this is basically teaching you how to become Christed. It talks about the desert. Before the first gate, you go through the desert. The desert is a place of trials. And I strongly believe that when Jesus was in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, which basically is symbolic for a long time, it wasn't a physical desert. It was the desert of the inside, which it explains here is the desert within the Book of Gates. I believe that the life of Christ that is described in the Gospels is Christianity's secret way of mirroring the Book of Gates. And people who aren't familiar with the Bible as well as the Egyptian mysteries aren't going to notice that. Another parallel between Christianity and the Book of Gates is it talks a lot about bread and wine, or in some cases it'll talk about ale, but it does mention that like ale and wine are interchangeable. So in here it talks about the body, the bread belonging to Osiris, and the wine or the blood being the blood of Osiris. So in Christianity, you have the bread being the body of Christ, the wine being the blood of Christ. So there are a lot of parallels there. What else did I want to bring out? It talks a lot about how, well, it doesn't talk a lot, but it mentions how royalty was also tied to magic or the priestly class. So those who were the kings, they also had priestly duties. And this also parallels Christianity in the sense that Christ is known both as a king as well as a priest. You had Melchizedek, who was a king as well as a priest. And when it comes to the first gate, I'll talk a little bit about the first gate, and then I'll save my other experiences for another video. With the first gate, it didn't appear as a desert for me. It appeared as a series of races. The first one started off in a sewer, and they were boat races. The second that I can remember was car races. Before each race, I called out two specific entities. The first one was Hanuman. The second one was Santa Muerte. Now, when you're going through the gates, it's your spirit self, I believe your higher self, which is being tried. Okay, so I believe that a lot of things done are instinctive, and it made a lot of sense to call out to these specific entities because Hanuman is basically the god that forgot his divinity, came down. I forgot why he forgot his divinity, but he had to go into the demon realm. It was something like that. And if he had known that he was a god, the demons would have known that he was a god. So he had to forget his divinity, go down to the realm of demons, and I believe he had to retrieve something. And then later on, he remembered that he was a god. So when we start off in this desert, we're human beings, and we forget our attachment to divinity, and we have to work towards actually realizing that we are aspects of God, basically. So it was appropriate that at the beginning of the gates, I called out to Hanuman, my spirit self. It was also appropriate to call out to Santa Muerte because those who know Santa Muerte, she's a Reaper entity. The Reapers take you where you need to go after you die. So even though I'm alive, I'm in the realm of the dead, and it would be easier to navigate through the realm of the dead if you had somebody who was familiar with the underworld. So I was able to get through the first gate. Like I said before, I was greeted by a giant snake. I didn't go too much into detail. She bit me. And then I was just like, yeah, I'm immune. Can you let me through? So, very interesting book on Amazon. It was 32 something and some change. Plus shipping and handling. Definitely a good investment for those who are looking for spiritual enlightenment, for spiritual growth, for understanding, for wisdom. I believe that, I've been getting a lot of visions attached to Egypt, and a lot of the books that I've been going through have been talking about, referring to Egypt. So I believe that studying Egypt and the system of belief, the archetypes of the gods, as well as their belief of death and life, is very important. So that will probably be a lot of my focus for future videos. So anybody who's interested in that. Also, I mean, like, I can kind of understand why people are turning to Christianity, people who've been involved with magic a lot. Now, I wouldn't say, if it's a mature person, I wouldn't say it's out of fear that they're turning to Christianity. It's the fact that people are starting to see the truth within it and ignore the fact that, you know, the organization of Christianity has done all this negative stuff. Okay, so Christianity has a place within the occult. I'll say that. There's a lot of parallels. There are certain books that speak about Jesus and how he went out into the world and subjected himself to other belief systems, like went to India, went to Asia, was in Egypt. And that's where he learned all the mysteries and learned that there were a lot of similarities, and that God really doesn't have a name, but because we're human, we all give God the name that we try to define God with a name. Okay, so everybody's going to have a different name for God in their culture, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're serving a different God. You know, like in Hinduism, you have one main God that's split into many gods. In Egypt, all the gods that came from Ra are said to be aspects of Ra. So this theme of monotheism isn't new, and a lot of Christians perceive these cultures as pagan, as worshiping different gods. But in reality, if you apply that idea that all the gods are just different aspects of God, then in a way it would still be monotheistic, wouldn't it? I don't know. So, yeah, that's it. That's all I have to say right now. As I work through the different hours, I'm just going to break down with my personal experiences, what I experienced, how I interpret those experiences, and just make videos out of that. So if you have ever gone through the gates, if you plan to go through the gates and you have any experiences that you want to talk about, feel free to hit me up. And you know, we can talk about it. All right, peace.